A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
But it is Wednesday and we always check in with the latest news out of Israel and the Middle East. And there's none better to talk about Israel and the Middle East than the beautiful Mandy Worby, who joins me in the studio today. And Mandy, for about 2 weeks now, Israel has really been on edge, haven't they? Expecting an attack at any time since the assassination of the Hamas leader in Iran.
Yeah, they really have, anticipating that there would be an attack. And what that has done, it has actually, because if the Middle East explodes, it's going to impact the whole world. The whole world. And there's an awful lot of talk at the moment about, are we already in the early stages of World War III? If the Middle East erupts, then it's on for young and old. So there was a joint statement released from the US government, the UK, France, Germany and Italy about the Middle East. And they basically said that they endorsed the joint call from, I'm not going to read the whole lot because it would be too long, but they endorsed a joint call from President Biden, the President Sisi of Egypt, the Emir Tamim of Qatar, to renew talks later this week, and hoping that it will conclude a deal as soon as possible. They don't want to waste any time on this. All parties, they're saying, must live up to their responsibilities, and in addition, quote, unfettered delivery and distribution of aid is needed. There is plenty of aid, but it's not getting to the people because Hamas is stealing it. So they're wanting unfettered delivery. They expressed their support for the defence of Israel against the Iranian aggression and against attacks from Iran-backed terrorist groups. And they're calling on Iran to stand down in its ongoing threats of a military attack against Israel, and discussing what the serious consequences for the regional security might look like if that attack took place. Now, the statement is reasonable, I've got to say, Andrew. It's reasonable. It doesn't mention the dismantling of Hamas, which is disappointing, one of Iran's main proxies, second to Hezbollah. It doesn't mention the hostages and ongoing war crimes by Hamas, by holding the hostages and continuing the war, abusing them and all of that. It does acknowledge, however, that Iran and its proxies are the aggressors and that their combined, support for the defence of Israel is confirmed. So that's good. But with regard to the constant drumbeating of a ceasefire deal, the primary issue in making a ceasefire deal is the demand by Hamas for the release of terrorists currently sitting in prisons for the crime of terrorism.
In Israel.
So, we can talk about that in a little while if you like.
So this is interesting. So the US, the UK, France, Germany and Italy, and also someone from Qatar, the leader from Qatar, has said that they want things to de-escalate. So they're worried about this conflict broadening beyond just Israel and Gaza. Yeah,
they are. I mean, I remember last week mentioning that Israel was expecting an attack from Iran and its proxies because of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, all right? And the rumour was, remember I said the rumour was that on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, there was the rumour that Iran and its proxies would attack Israel. Okay, Tisha B'Av, as I said, is the anniversary of many catastrophes that have taken place in the history of the Jewish people. Tisha B'Av was yesterday, okay? And the attack didn't happen. And the expectation in reports from various nations, including the US, was that Iran and her proxies were going to attack Israel on this particular day, but that the attacks would be coordinated lasting 3 to 4 days. Okay, again, nothing has happened, but I personally believe that that's the result of an extraordinary amount of prayer around the world on Israel's behalf. I mean, I believe the Lord is thwarting Iran's efforts. It doesn't mean that Iran and her proxies are not going to still attack, but with all my heart, I do believe that God is protecting the Jewish nation because of the prayers of Jews and Christians standing in solidarity. I mean, I've been calling daily on my social media for believers, Jews and Christians, to pray. And a lot of people have been responding, we're praying, we're praying, we're praying. the concern at the moment is that Israel's enemies, headed, of course, by the mullahs in Iran, are working on a coordinated attack. Now, that means the coordinated attack would be Iran, obviously, but with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. Now, if Israel responds to this coordinated attack, Turkey has said, Erdogan in Turkey has said they are going to attack Israel. The Russians are actually, there are arms shipments that are being sent from Moscow to Iran. It's all out in the open. So this thing is this boiling cauldron. Add into the mix that the Ukrainians have just invaded Russia and Russia's going, what the? And Americans going, oh, we didn't know anything. I mean, this thing is a boiling cauldron. So, of course, any attacks, the coordinated attack, they're also anticipating that it would also mean attacks against Jews and Israeli interests and Jewish-owned businesses around the world in the diaspora. So it's pretty tense at the moment.
It's just awful, isn't it? But obviously the rest of the world are concerned about this thing. As you said, if it's spread into, Turkey getting involved and Russia arming Iran and Iran launching an attack on Israel, yeah. It's a big problem for the world. And the leader of the free world right now doesn't even seem to comprehend what's going on in his immediate environment, let alone what's happening in the Middle East. So it really is a time for Christians to pray, isn't it, Mandy?
It really, really is. I will say, though, with regard to the US, they did say that they were going to continue arms shipments, sending arms shipments, even though it's still limited. I mean, I just read an article just this morning that the US has approved a $20 billion arms shipment to Israel, limited though it is. But the UK, since the new government came in, which is very anti-Israel, they've said they're putting an embargo on any components that Israel might need. That is very concerning, but I'll tell you what this has done. And this was another article I read just this morning. Because Israel's quote-unquote friends have basically been, they give with one hand, they take away with another. They say they support, but then they undermine. If Israel's quote-unquote friends betray her, what that's actually causing now, it's causing Israel to do what Israel always does. She pivots, she adjusts, and she then goes and she looks after herself. She's actually beginning her own munitions manufacturing now for some of the bigger bombs and other things, components, because if she can't get those from her friends, she's going to make them herself. What this is going to end up, and I said this months and months ago, that Israel will pivot if her friends don't help her, and she will make them herself, which means her friends will diminish and Israel will become stronger. And she will continue to build, which is Israel has survived because of this ability to pivot, adapt and build and keep going on.
Yeah, and you can't blame them because
not at all.
Some people don't realise there's only one Jewish nation in the whole world. I think there's about 40-something Muslim nations in the world. Yeah. Many of them just hate Israel, want to see Israel destroyed. And so, and people say, that they should just be more willing to negotiate and cede territory. But they really can't, can they, Mandy? They're really on their back foot, aren't they? There's nowhere else for them to go. And Jews around the world are feeling more and more insecure and unsafe. Yeah. But they always in the back of their mind know, well, we can always go to Israel because that's at least our home. But if Israel is destroyed, then the Jews around the world have just got nothing, have they? They have to defend.
This is exactly what is happening. Like here's the thing, during the lead up to World War II and during World War II, do you know when that was all happening and anti-Semitism was rising in Europe, do you know what they used to say? Go home to Palestine. Because it was called Palestine back then because it was named that by Emperor Hadrian. It was never a country. It was named that as an insult by Emperor Hadrian in the year 125. So they would say to the Jews, go home to Palestine because they knew that was the Jewish homeland. Well, now that they're in their homeland, it's now called Israel. The world is saying, go back to Europe, go back to Europe. They say, we don't have a home in Europe. This is our home. So what they're saying is, you don't have a home anywhere. And that is the goal of Hamas. Hamas's goal is wipe them out.
Yeah, from the river to the sea. And this is what's being chanted in university campuses and public squares across the Western world. It's just a tragedy. And just finally, Mandy, what's the latest on, is there any chance of another hostage deal? And if there is a hostage deal, what would the implications and the impacts be upon Israel?
Okay, so this is a very complicated issue. Look, just a couple of days ago, Hamas put out a statement saying that they had killed a terrorist, injured 2 more. Now, that's a war crime. They're admitting to the whole world this is a war crime, and this is what they do. They don't care about the rules of war. They don't care about human rights. They don't care. They hide amongst their own people where I said this last week, where their civilians go, Hamas hides in them so that they can attack from those civilians. Israel will respond. They will kill their own people, put them in harm's way so that they can use that as a battering ram against the Jewish state.
Yeah, propaganda tool.
It is. And so the hostage situation is very, very difficult. So when this happens, you can imagine the terror, the horror that the hostages are experiencing, but for the families as well, they are literally frantic. They are desperate. What this is causing, there is a rising again of the very hard left anti-government position in Israel. The Israel on October 6th was on the brink of civil war because of this fighting, this conflict between them. This is rising up again. One of the leaders of this rising movement is former Prime Minister Ehud Barak. He is literally calling for the overthrow of the government. He's calling for civil disobedience and calling any hostage deal, anything at all. The problem with that, first of all, the Likud party, which is the leading party that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in, they're reporting him for what is essentially sedition. Some would call it treason. Something needs to be done. They're in the middle of war. Calling for civil disobedience and the destruction and overthrow of a government is sedition.
Yeah.
That needs to be dealt with. But here's the problem that they have. Yahya Sinwar, who is now the head of Hamas, he was serving 3 life sentences for killing Israeli soldiers and Palestinian civilians in a prison. He was released in 2011, along with 1,025 more terrorists in Israeli prisons, for the release of one kidnapped Israeli soldier named Gilad Shalit. Yahya Sinwar, while he was in prison, was operated on and healed of cancer by a doctor specialist, a Jewish doctor, right? He was released from prison. He masterminded October 7. A terrorist was released and unleashed hell on October 7. The doctor who healed Yahya Sinwar, his nephew was murdered in at the Nova Festival on October 7. The man who saved his life, that Sinwar, murdered his nephew. Now, just 2 days ago, there was a young 17-year-old man, Palestinian is now 18. He was 17 in November last year. He was released from prison because he was a terrorist. He was released from prison in a deal to get about 30-odd hostages out of Gaza. This was on the 23rd of November last year. Since his release, he has committed numerous shooting attacks that the IDF were trying to catch him on. And just 2 days ago, he attacked an Israeli man, a civilian. Hasn't killed him, but severely injured him. He himself was shot in the process. Tarek, his name is. He was released. So the problem is the ideology it drives them. This is Israel's quandary. If they have, everybody says, make a deal, make a deal, make a deal. Making a deal means releasing terrorists to get their own people back. But those terrorists, once they're released, go out, kill, maim, and kidnap more Israelis. It's a quandary that the Israeli government has.
It's such a tricky, challenging situation for them, isn't there? Yeah. But I think, like you said earlier, Mandy, I think the best thing that we can do, our listeners in Australia especially, is we can pray.
Please pray
for the peace of Jerusalem and the peace of Israel. But Mandy, Worby, we could talk about this for a long time. There's so much going on. But I want to thank you so much for joining us again on 2020 Today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.